Let's read this first story from ABC 13 WHAM. Project Veritas says it caught CNN staffer admitting network pushed anti-Trump propaganda. This is an ABC affiliate reporting this, which if local news outlets are picking up Project Veritas, the story is pretty big. They say Veritas unveiled a video Tuesday that the group says is of a CNN staffer describing how the network worked to show then presidential candidate Joe Biden in a favorable light during the 2020 campaign. The undercover video captured a man the self-proclaimed conservative watchdog group identified as CNN technical director Charlie Chester. I'm not sure Veritas has ever self-proclaimed to be conservative watchdogs, but I digress. Saying he decided to work with the network because it focused on removing former President Donald Trump. Chester also credited CNN as a critical tool in electing Biden. Quote, "Look, what we did, we CNN got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. I came to CNN because I wanted to be a part of that," the man said in one portion of the video. Chester was speaking to someone off camera at undisclosed locations. He was targeted through the dating app Tinder, according to Mediaite. That is impressive work from Project Veritas. Wow. How do they do that? Tinder's random. It shows you a person. So James O'Keefe has got young women like swiping right on these dudes, like just scouring Tinder looking for someone who says, "I work at CNN." Boom.
Well, that's a foreign intelligence way. If you just do mass, spread, and then you can target it down as you find the person.
I'm impressed. If they really did use Tinder to get access to these guys, that means Veritas does more substantive investigative work than I realized.
Yeah, good tradecraft.
Or it could have been a girl that just met some dude and was like, "Oh, you work for CNN? Oh, I got to get in touch with Project Veritas about this."
I got to say, if they're reporting that, I really believe it, because you have to wonder how it is they consistently get access to some of these people. They're not just like walking into places and being like, "Hi, tell me all your secrets." Right. Going on a date with some dude and having him spill the beans. Now, I will say you got to be careful about one thing. Could this guy be hamming it up because he's trying to get laid?
Well,
right.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, of course. Right. Is she like, "I hate Trump"? Because I hate Trump too.
Yeah, in fact.
Yeah. And then she's like, yeah. Like, wouldn't it be cool? Like, CNN helped get him out. He's like, "Oh, yeah, CNN definitely did that. I did that. That's why I'm here."
Right.
Want to go back to my place?
Yeah. That's almost why we need the kind of body camera right with the police officer before they pull up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You want the totality of the circumstances. But
you know what though? I will say, there was one undercover video that Project Veritas got with a guy I'm not going to name that I knew, and they had a young woman talking to this guy, and the guy was saying all of this stuff about what he could do at the New York Times or whatever, and I'm like, dude, he is hamming it up. He is trying to impress this lady. He's talking smack, and I'll say it right. I'm not gonna shill for Veritas in every circumstance. I'll criticize him if I see something reason to do it, but this is different. This is someone who's working for CNN, a technical director, who has no problem telling members of the public, be it, is he lying to this young woman about what CNN does? He's confident enough, for whatever reason, to say CNN produces fear, we propagandize, and our goal was political. Now he said it. That's it.
And I do think one of the challenges here, though, for CNN, and of course it applies to other outlets, is that, on one side, you do have, and we saw it in the campaign, obviously very anti-Trump coverage, very pro-Biden. And the other side, certainly some of their foreign policy correspondents, Kylie Atkins, Jim Sciutto, who I think has sort of moved more in the opinion side, do really good reporting. So it's a challenge for them in a sense, right? That this, because this is not great for their credibility, the outlets, and it's sort of unfair on them in a sense.
I don't think they care. I think, you turn on reliable sources today, and what's Oliver Darcy and Brian Stelter talking about? Who's the right-wing boogeyman today? I jokingly, I'll tweet at Brian Stelter that he's the host of the Fox News review show. Right. Because you turn on Sunday morning with CNN, and it's Brian Stelter telling you what Fox News is talking about, and I'm like, what is this? How is this in any way news about the media environment? Tucker Carlson said something offensive. And I'm like, okay, what's going on with the media? Are there layoffs? Is the business growing? What are journalists doing? No, it's just basically CNN's like, hey, we can make money because people don't like Fox News. And there you go.
In a sense, though, Brian Stelter's media show, it's not so much like Howie Kurtz on Fox. It's sort of, I think, more become kind of Laura Ingraham, right? Or Sean Hannity, that it's a more overtly opinion show that's presenting itself as a media show.
Absolutely. And I'll say that, with respect, He's allowed to do that.
Right.
If he wants to be an opinion show, if he wants to be the Sunday morning version of Hannity for the left or whatever.
Right.
The only problem is, when Sean Hannity rags on the liberal media, there's many different liberal medias to rag on.
Right.
The Fox News is almost one of a kind. I mean, for cable news, it basically is. When reliable sources, CNN just talks about Fox News all day, every day, I'm like, I don't see the urgency here, man. You know what I mean? It's one channel. I know they got a big viewership, but when you combine CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, HLN, CNN, etc., I mean, we're looking at 30, 40, 50 million views or whatever. And then Fox News, they're huge. 3 million views. They're rivaling, Rachel Maddow, and they're bouncing back and forth between CNN and beating CNN in the ratings. But you combine all of these media outlets and their bias, Fox News doesn't really reach that level. So it's like CNN doing that show is really weird in my opinion. But more to the point, CNN's coverage has been just absolutely awful, along with many of these other outlets. Now we're hearing this guy say all this stuff. I'm just kind of like, I have something I call the CNN challenge. I did call the CNN challenge. You can't really do it anymore because Trump's not president. But I'm somebody who watches the news, and I would turn out. I used to watch CNN. I used to leave CNN running in the background, so I'd have some like breaking news. Here's what's happening, and then just one day I'm like, are they talking about Trump again? So I switched to Fox News, and they're like, protests erupt in Iran. Tehran. Protesters in Tehran are doing. And I'm like, wow, this is big. And then I switched back to CNN, like, but Trump, what you need to understand about Trump. And I'm like, okay. So I did it several times. One point, Fox News is like, Hong Kong, protests erupt, China's moving in. Turn to CNN. Now, Donald Trump is... I even turned to Fox News once, and they're like, a big winter storm is headed our way. Everyone, you need to buckle down. Turn to CNN. Oh, Donald Trump. And so I just called it the Trump challenge, because that's basically what their bread and butter. Now, take all of that information, and someone made a really interesting point. With this CNN technical director stating in numerous videos, we were activists, we were trying to get the president out, the goal was political, we produced propaganda. Some people have said that fulfills the actual malice standard, now allowing Donald Trump to sue CNN for defamation because you have a CNN staffer, a director, on the record saying, yeah, we're full of it.
Can you use this guy's, is it testimony? Is this considered, what is it? Can you use this guy's statements as like in a court of law?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
No, they would have to get him tested. I don't think there's any chance of that. The actual malice standard, New York Times v. Sullivan, which is the case, especially the federal courts, the judiciary in terms of the case on this has been very predisposed towards deference, towards media speech. And I think that's the way to go. And for them, they would have to show, number one, that it was representative of CNN.
And of who spoke in the first place.
Exactly. Right? Did he have the authority as an agency to say that?
And the individual who reported, say, Donald Trump, punched a goat or something.
Right.
Was it the same person?
Right.
Did that person genuinely believe they were telling the truth? So it's not so cut and dry. But I actually I agree to a certain degree that protecting speech for the media is important, in that sometimes there's a legitimate attempt at reporting news, you make a mistake, and if we sued every time someone got something wrong, there wouldn't be news outlets.
Right.
News outlets should correct, and that I guess that was the intent. It was like, well, they can just correct the record, but there's no obligation to do it. That's problem number one. If CNN writes fake news and Donald Trump says, please correct this, they can say no. Then, Trump or somebody will file a defamation suit, and the judge will say, anti-slap, you're dismissed, get out. So how do you correct the record when these news outlets are lying and you can't break through that actual malice standard, that barrier?
Well, I think the ultimate correction point, you would hope, and certainly I believe it is that credibility is lost, right? That the consumer ultimately gets to decide what they want with news, right? You have people watching this show, you have people watching CNN, whatever their reasons. You have people reading across the gamut of news and commentary. And that ultimately, we would hope that people decide, actually, when they see stuff coming out and a lack of responsibility, right? People are willing to forgive mistakes, that perhaps it's not the place for them to.
That's the inverse, though. If CNN admits they were wrong, they lose credibility.
Well, they lose credibility with their most loyal base, but I think if they don't admit they're wrong,
then no
where
one
the
knows they were
saliency
wrong.
of the fact, well, that I think people are talking about, Project Veritas, right? That it's out there. I agree with you. You note earlier that I think is absolutely true. the fact that Fox News is in its own, at least in cable news, kind of wilderness. And we see this right with Newsmax trying to break in there and struggling to get on. And we saw actually, it's something, there's going to be a great battle in the UK coming up with a couple of new networks trying to break in there. And some of the lobbying already, the BBC, they don't want that competition in there. Yeah. Canada with the Sun News Network that wasn't able to be viable because it wasn't able to get on, providers. And so, it's a double-edged sword.
If you can't force them to correct, we have a very serious problem, because then there's incentive to lie. They make money on the lie. If they write a fake news story, they could be sitting there thinking like, look, the worst case scenario is we write a story saying Donald Trump punches a baby goat. We're going to get 10 million views. We're going to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if we have to, we'll retract tomorrow. It's no big deal. Because you know what? They make money on the retraction as well.
Yeah, and I think a broader challenge there is that I used to think one of the great solutions to this is we have Google News, right, that you can read around. And then I realized, Google News seems to be providing some news outlets more equal than others, to borrow from Orwell. And it's really, it's true. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know why. I have my suspicions that there's an inherent bias. I actually emailed Google about this, and they said, no, our algorithms prevent that from ever happening. Okay. I'm not convinced that might be the case. So, if people, as you say, right, people need to be able to not only access the news, but know that counterpoint exists. And people are busy, right?
Yes, right. So the problem I see is this. You hire a plumber, when the plumber doesn't fix your toilet.
Right.
So you're like, hey, buddy, I need you to come in and fix the toilet. He comes in and says, your toilet's all fixed. And you're like, all right, you flush it. And then the water spills out. And you're like, it's not fixed.
Right.
I can see it's broken.
Right.
With news, you're hoping that what they're telling you is the truth. After they come out and they say, here's your official news report on the Middle East, go ahead and read it. You're like, I'm assuming it's true. Right. I just cross my fingers and hope the guy I hired to do the job is telling me the truth. And often they're not. They do clever tricks. Sometimes it's the truth, but you omit half the information. The story is very different. For instance, when the Trump slump hit and the ratings dropped, Newsmax ratings go down. CNN ratings go down. What does CNN report? Newsmax ratings collapse. But if they told you the truth, everyone's ratings went down. The reality was people in general are just tired of news. By framing it only as Newsmax, they make it seem like Trump's followers are losing faith or they're not interested. In reality, it had nothing to do with it.
Right.
That's just the manipulation. It's the framing technique.
Right. No, it is. And I do think, though, if we look at the ability of especially the younger generation to access, the astuteness with which they are dealing with technology and looking for, more creative, even rebellious kind of outlooks, that dynamic is only going to continue to grow. And I know that sounds kind of basic and shallow and sort of almost kind of corporatist in its simplicity, but if you look at foreign locales, for example, the degree to which, for example, Clubhouse is performing, a massive challenge to China, that the censors, this industrial, hundreds of thousands of people employed to constrain flows of information. They can't, because then there's a sub Clubhouse, and then there's someone goes across and uses a cutout ISP, and and certainly that's what we've been doing. The US was doing in Iran. I think the Biden administration has actually cut it off, the CIA program. But
we were allowing Iranians to communicate.
We were providing them with independent satellite kind of internet
and Biden
satellite.
Cut it off.
As I understand it, it's part of a covert action program that the Trump administration set up.
Wow, that seems like a good thing.
Yeah,
helping people communicate with each other and
human rights as well, right?
Yeah,
Trump supposedly didn't like that so much, but
Biden must not be for human rights, I suppose.
Right. Well,
I'm starting to have a hard time differentiating between The Onion and CNN and random YouTuber spouting who he hates and loves. Like it's all becoming this crap hole, like just opinion. And like, is it even is it farce? I can't even tell.
The funny thing is, the Babylon Bee is, at this point, I'm going to wag my finger at it. They're not satire anymore. You know why?
Not.
Because they're actually reporting the truth, but facetiously. So they'll say something like, What I think it was the Babylon Bee that put this out. They say after securing peace in the Middle East, the U.S. announces they'll withdraw from Afghanistan because Joe Biden announced we're going to be withdrawing from Afghanistan in September. Hey, I'm all for that. Thank you, Joe Biden. I mean it.
All right.
No, I think he's going to just throw him right back into Syria. So, we got to make sure we're going to stay vigilant on this one. But I do think it's funny when the Babylon Bee reports a story that it is satire. They're making fun of it, but it's like basically the truth, but snarky. So that's like we're in such a world of absurdity that even now, I mean, look, the Biden administration is ripe for parody, especially right now. Kyle Kashuv tweeted, "I was told by so many people that if we voted for Joe Biden, everything would come back to normal and the violence would stop." So where are we at, guys? The riots are kicking back up. Everything's getting worse. It is a world of parody, man. I
do think still. And of course, my accent would suggest bias here, but I'm trying to, be objective. BBC News, their website, I think is still very good. There is, of course, bias. The analytical, when they have some of the reporters doing their analysis, I think the bias comes through them more.
Yeah.
But the basic nuts and bolts reporting on there and the ability to kind of go in different places, a lot of that is informed by some of the World Service stuff they do. And there are actually pretty good structured checks and balances at BBC. And I complained about a piece their Russian BBC News wrote about me, about an article I'd written a couple of years ago. And, they have a 2-week, respond to complaints, goes through a process. So, of course, the counterpoint to that is, well, that is being paid for by, the TV license fee, which everyone in the UK has to pay. So there's a tax, so this is not,
BBC is pretty good.
But you've got to read around, I suppose.
Exactly.
You've got to read around.
Because
which is sad,
it's pretty good doesn't mean you can just trust every single thing you're going to read from them or from anybody. So when it comes to sources, they have a lot of dry articles. That's a good thing.
Right.
When you read the news and it's like Donald Trump said today that he was planning on putting tariffs on this country. Joe Biden responded, blah blah blah, and it's just that.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, that's probably just good.
Right.
It's when they start talking about the far right and the it's like opinion pops
the
in.
alt-right, the definition.
But here's the important point about the Times v. Sullivan thing, that Project Veritas has just won and may set precedent for years to come. I'm sure you're familiar. They're suing the New York Times. You heard about that?
Yes.
Well, they got passed the motion to dismiss, which is huge. I think James said only 8 times in the past 80 years or whatever has a motion to dismiss been have people gotten past that. And what the judge basically said is that well, hold on. The New York Times said these statements about Project Veritas being deceptive are unverifiable opinion and thus are not actionable. And so the judge responded, okay, well, if that was the case, then I guess a fact-based news article, or at least one purporting to be, would have to inform its readers this is an opinion, not assert an opinion as a fact. In which case, I guess he's basically saying, if you say, this article I'm about to read to you is 100% fact, Ian is a deceiver and a liar, then the assumption is I'm saying statements of fact in a newspaper.
Yeah, I just think when we get to the Supreme Court, I take the point that the case law is trying to, I think the judges are trying to get a little bit more nuance on this. And when it gets to the Supreme Court, I think it's probably going to be, 8-1 in favor in the New York Times. Why do
you think so?
Because I think the judiciary, and I ultimately think it's the right course.
That they should be allowed to lie?
That maximal speech, for all its costs, lies included, is advantageous over not so much restricted speech, but the chilling of speech. I think that is the great concern in jurisprudence and really foundational, actually, to the United States. I mean, and you look at how the contrast in English defamation law, for example, which is why, we were talking earlier, I think, why we have the Qatar World Cup. It's a very good case to be made for that the lawyers, the Sunday Times, didn't report as early as they could have on the bribery. And, certainly that it's interesting, for example, how much American journalists will get letters from English London PR or legal firms saying this is highly defamatory. Take it down. No. Now I know that's the who would disagree with that?
Maybe because it is, and it's a lot of lies, and they get away with it.
I don't think it is. I think when you're talking about Russian organized crime bosses who like to kill people, and it doesn't get reported in the British media because they have a lot of money or take you to court, it's good that. I'm writing about that. I couldn't do that in England. And that matters, that stuff.
The problem then is that they literally just make things up. Activists are dominating these newsrooms. And when, the idea works when you have a newsroom that's filled with people of good moral standing. You'll have a few bad people trying to lie, but when activists take over a newsroom like they did in the New York Times, and they did, several employees have already resigned or been forced out or written letters about it, then there's going to be like, awesome, now we're going to use Times v. Sullivan to say whatever we want about whoever we want, and there's nothing they can do about it. But then they literally come out and say, the New York Times said in their defense, our news article, which is purporting to be statements of fact, are actually unverifiable opinion. And the average reader doesn't know that.
I guess I have more confidence in the average reader in terms of being more discriminate. I think certainly, again, this generational shift. I mean, you look at, your viewership, The Hill, Saga and Jetty, and Crystal Ball's show. These new form media places are just growing exponentially. And you got to think that some of these people are, even if they're not necessarily abandoning they're still reading the New York Times. They're reading around more or viewing around more,
right?
And so I do think, again, at some point you're always going to have those people who want to hear what they want to hear, but you're also going to have, I think, a lot of people who get slightly frustrated with limited time, right? They want to be informed. Investigative journalism that really stands up is still the best way to generate traffic.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.